If you guys have watched my videos, you would know about the video explaining why expert sucks. And now, I am more intelligent, more big brain, I now say, it still sucks. Matter of fact, it's even worse than before. However, I didn't make this video to only talk about how easy it is to beat expert. With the right strategy and the right towers, it is definitely a challenging mode. And especially, when you get the high rank towers, you should expect them to be powerful units, it's just that you have to build a strategy to keep your defenses secure. But, expert mode follows this, so why am I claiming it to be so bad? Let's get into it. In tower defense games, there's such things called filler waves. Like an anime where there's filler for a plot, filler waves are when there are waves that either don't add anything but to add length for the final wave, or a wave that has no effect to the player at all. A prime example of a filler wave in expert is wave 20. With enemies only 200 health and multiplier 1, this does nothing to the player at all because of how weak and little money they give. And you may be saying, there's no filler waves in expert. Well my friend, in the time right now, expert has waves like 12 to 15, and although you need a few towers to do the job, but let's be honest, even with a few cheap towers, and a good enough map, which is most of them, you can defeat them. However, to explain why, let's compare the times between the very first layout of expert to now, because this will help us find out what went wrong. The layout of expert was very difficult, with regular Juggernaut being the most powerful. Back then, more enemies were stealth, and there were very few counters against the enemies like Revived Titan, Armored Runners, Revived Juggernauts and more. And the limit of how many towers you could bring were small because the best was Juggernaut, and everything else was support. Wave 34 used to be the hardest wave because of the multiplier spam and how Juggernaut was not able to deal with the spam, and you needed to resort to laser gunners, pierce or artillery's aim. For wave 35, back then it was easier because of the splash damage towers you would have. There's chances where a multiplier 3 can multiply the smashers and revive boss 2, which increases difficulty, so you need an artillery to at least help. Now, compare that to today. Any option could do, and almost every option can do expert. The thing is that expert was built for the very first release of TDX. Expert has old wave layouts that are very difficult when we only have the towers and balances made for those times, but now that there are balance changes and new towers that would completely destroy those waves. A good example is the artillery, which, before it did 1600 damage with not ignoring explosive resistance. However, now it is 2000 damage while also ignoring explosive resistance. This destroys the purpose of what the wave layouts for expert are supposed to be, and that's where filler waves pop up. Now that there are buff towers that can now deal with the waves that expert gives, it's now just a filler wave to give some cash. Missile Trooper can now deal with every explosive necessary wave, wave 7, wave 10, wave 12, wave 15, wave 20 and beyond. Yes, while you should make beginner towers useful, the issue is that when you get better explosive towers, it's basically just a Missile Trooper but better, so other explosive towers extremely overshadow Missile Trooper. This means that the explosive resistant waves are redundant and do not bring any difficulty if Missile Trooper is overshadowed but can still deal with the explosive waves. It's important to know that when we are talking about balancing and difficulty, we shouldn't be bringing in expensive towers like Golden Ranger, Golden Juggernaut or XWM Turret. Those towers are way more expensive than Juggernaut and should shred expert mode if used correctly. So the main issue of expert mode is that it is too old and very bad for the state of the game. The towers before the buff were used to fight against Mark II struggled because of their stats and health, but since most of them were buffed to fit the state of endless, it now makes expert fun only because of how easy and how much of a variety is. Yet John says that he made expert to make it even more of a challenge. Most of these towers were buffed to provide a more use for the end game like Expert and Endless, and what this does is make Endless a bit easier with having more of a variety to continue, while Expert gives you enough money to be able to kill Mark II almost immediately. And the filler waves gives you more cash for the next waves that are harder, but because of that cash, that wave is easier. But wait. If this is the case, then shouldn't Elite be experiencing this issue too? No. Elite works in a unique way. This mode limits you to not be able to use farms because of how many waves there are. And if you do farm, and you farm too much, you will lose. Elite's purpose is strategy. While the boss may take a bit to take down, you have to do something while you're fighting Revived Plague Doctor. You can't be standing around like how you do in Expert. It also limits your money, so you have to use your money wisely. This means that towers like Golden Juggernaut, Warship, and more are not viable to be used because of how expensive they are. I can't even max out a Juggernaut until wave 25, which is 3 waves before the boss, so imagine trying to save up for a Golden Juggernaut. You may lose. Like I said earlier, Elite is mainly focused on strategy. Having limited money and limited choices forces you to make a decision to choose what tower you place, and in Elite, there's either no or very few filler waves. So, how do you fix Expert? Well, revise everything. It is because when you buff the beginner waves, they possibly give more money, making the last waves easy, so the developers have to make it where each wave is harder than the last while also limiting money, so use shields. And that is the Expert issue. This took a minute because Expert has flaws that make it bad. But hopefully some developers could use this to probably fix it. They also made 2 feedbacks about Expert, so it seems like they are going in the right direction.